How are you? All right? Yes. Good. Right. Okay. So I'm a sales coach. I've been doing it for quite a few years now. From a sales coaching and training perspective, I spend a lot of time talking about the conversation that we have with customers. What I'm going to talk to you about tonight is much more around the conversation that we have with ourselves, because that actually is where it all starts in terms of our ability to be able to be effective. So last night I was having dinner with an old friend of mine who he's currently the financial services lead for Amazon for their AWS platform. He had a stellar sales career in Microsoft. I worked with him a few years back when he was an IC, an individual contributor for one of my customers. And if you look at him right now, he is the model of a super salesperson. But it wasn't always the case for him. And I got a telephone call one day from the VP of sales for this organisation. And they said, can you go out with this guy because his performance has fallen off a cliff. No idea why. We're really struggling to understand. His activity is high, on the surface a great attitude, great sales capability, really good communication skills. Can you go out with him for a day? So I went and picked him up. We had a coaching day sorted out. We're going to go and do a few meetings. I was going to sit back and watch him, having a conversation with him. But after about 2 or 3 hours, it became really evident what the problem was. And it was highlighted by the fact that we were in a car park together. He was bent over double, which sounds a bit dodgy actually. Not that, James. He was bent over double with fear and anxiety. He was almost being physically sick because of what was going on in his head. And the massive problem was that his mindset was completely shot to bits. And just listening to him and observing him, the big issue was he was letting a load of external factors that he couldn't control really affect his mindset. And as a result of that, that was crippling his capability. And in essence, he'd lost his sales confidence. You see what I did there? No. Yeah. Okay, you can go back later. So what I'm going to talk to you about now is rather than having an outside to in mindset, where we're allowing external factors to create what's going on in our heads and our thinking, I'm going to talk to you about trying to create an inside to out mindset. And hopefully this is relevant to everybody. So there are 4 things that we can talk through based around something called the mind performance cycle. It's a sports psychology concept. 4 things that we can control which massively affect our feelings, which then affect our behaviours and therefore affect our results and our performance. And that's an ongoing cycle. And if they're positive, we tend to get an upward spiral. And if they're negative, we tend to get a downward spiral. So the first of those is self-talk. So self-talk is the dialogue we have going on in our heads. Right? We all have some voices in your heads. And what we tend to have in that situation is either a positive coach on one shoulder, the angel, or a negative critic on the other, and that's the devil. And what we tend to do is focus a lot more, particularly in times when we're feeling a little bit uncertain about stuff, on the negative coach. And that becomes really, really loud in our heads. So how can you deal with that in terms of affecting your feelings? Well, the first thing actually is just to be conscious of what your self-talk is saying to you. So what actually is going on in your mind? What actually is being said to you in your own head? The next thing then is to try and write down your self-talk. Write down what actually is happening. What are you saying to yourself? Because the moment you write it down, that gives you an opportunity to be able to change the self-talk and create something that seems to be more positive in your mind. So some self-talk might be, I can't sell in this market. It's Brexit's happening. It's a complete disaster. One thing that really affected me when I was doing a direct sales role was I thought I was rubbish at negotiation. So if I think I'm rubbish at negotiation, guess what's going to happen? The moment I go and have a negotiation with somebody, I'm going to start collapsing and I'm not going to get the output I want to get. And as a result of that, I probably lost thousands of pounds in commission because I was just, in my own mind, rubbish at negotiation. So one of the things that you can do here is then start to play around with the language. So in terms of negotiation, from my perspective, the moment I saw and started to perceive negotiation as something that was fun and that I could enjoy, I started getting much better outputs. In terms of working with one client, we're doing some stuff around questioning, and some of the salespeople were saying, I find these questions really difficult to ask. They're difficult questions to ask. So in that situation, what we did there was just change the talk and talk about, well, they're the commission questions. If you ask those questions, you'll get to commission, so they were known as the commission questions. So the first bit is your self-talk. And I'd encourage you, tomorrow or the next few days, just check in with what you're being said, or what's being said to yourself in your own mind. The second bit is the images that you play in your heads. So Peter Crosby actually talked about this a couple of events ago, I think about his daughter, who's part of the GB squad for horse riding, and they do lots of stuff around visualization. So actually visualizing yourself in the situation, feeling it, smelling it, hearing it, and going through the steps that you need to go through. The massive benefit of visualization is it starts to create the neural pathways in our minds that help us to execute the behavior, particularly in times when we start to get a little bit under pressure. So I'm really hoping that the England football team is visualizing penalties for this summer. We'll see about that. And actually I came in here early and I started to visualize me doing this speech and visualizing you as the audience. I've got to say, by the way, I've visualized you being a lot better looking than you actually are. Particularly this group over here, but that's not personal, of course. So there's the visualization part of it, but the other thing about our brains is they're incredibly powerful. And what we can do with our brains is we can create the movies of things that have happened in the past, and we start to put those into the future, and we start catastrophizing what happened based upon negative thoughts that we've had in the past. A little story about this. I was running a workshop recently with a client, and there's one girl there who had a customer. She's an account manager. She's saying, every time I go and see this customer, he's always really nasty to me. He's always really rude, always threatening to leave. So we just talked through, well, what's actually the movie you're running in your mind? What's the reality that you have in your mind that is causing this to be the outcome? Can you change the movie? So she started thinking about that and playing around with it, and actually 3 days after she left the program, she did 175% of her target in 3 days for the monthly target. And one of those was with the client that she was struggling with, and her feedback was he was so much nicer, but it was her behaviours that were affecting his behaviour. I've been given the warning by James. Is that right? Yeah? Okay, so the third one is the environment. And we all know, spending some good money on a nice environment helps us to work and get better feelings. I'm just going to move on to the last one, which is about your physiology. So, have you heard of the power pose? Taking the power pose? No?
I've heard of it.
You've heard of it? Right, okay. I'm not going to get you to do it. Okay, but there's some stuff done by somebody over in America, Amy Dunny, who's talking about the fact that if you take on a power pose for 2 minutes a day, it increases testosterone in your brains and reduces the cortisol, which is the stress hormone. As a result of that, you tend to be more powerful and more confident. So it might be worthwhile having a look at that. But the last thing I want to talk about is in terms of every emotion that we have is a different breathing pattern. Okay, so when we start to get a little bit nervous about doing something, our breathing starts to get very shallow, and our heart rate starts to go up, and we go into flight or flight response. When we're in that situation, our body is getting ready to either have a punch up or to run away when we're just nervous. And our resources go, and they're being used up that were normally used for our senses. And we can't actually listen properly, we can't see properly, we start to be able to converse in a less effective way. So if you're in a situation where you're feeling a little bit nervous, a bit worried, the best thing you can do is just breathe very, very deeply. The optimum number of breaths per minute is 6. So really deep breaths to bring your heart rate down, and that reduces your flight or fight response. Okay, so just 4 things there that you can focus on for your internal conversation that will help to build your sales confidence. So thank you very much.